Maria Corina Machado was in hiding, as she had been for 13 months, but on October 10th in the wee hours of the morning, she received a phone call.
Am I talking to Maria Corina Machado?
Yes, this is Maria Corina.
And I'm calling to inform you that in a few minutes it shall be announced here at the Nobel Institute that you will be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for 2025.
Thank you so much, but I hope you understand this is a movement. This is a achievement of a whole society. I am just one person.
Maria Corina Machado, leader of the opposition movement to Nicolas Maduro's socialist dictatorship in Venezuela, has received the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize, and now all eyes are on Venezuela. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Undoctrination. My name is Maggie, and I talk a lot on this channel about international freedom movements. Most recently, we covered Nepal and Bolivia, and today I want to talk about Venezuela. Venezuela's descent into socialism and dictatorship has personally impacted many people in my life, and maybe yours as well. The United States has become a place of refuge for young, freedom-loving dissidents who, under threat of imprisonment, starvation, or simply a lack of opportunities, have had to flee to freer pastures. They've heard the seductive promises of socialism and felt the devastating consequences. Last year, an election was held, one that many international democracy groups considered fraudulent. And in its wake, Nicolas Maduro, current God King of Venezuela, has unleashed a new wave of terror on his opposition. The leader of that opposition, Maria Corina Machado, just received the Nobel Peace Prize, but may not even be able to attend the ceremony. Fears for her safety are not unfounded. Last year, one of her organizers, a 31-year-old woman named Maria Oropeza, was kidnapped from her home and thrown into one of Latin America's most infamous torture facilities. Her crime? Publicly opposing the dictatorship. Maria is still being held, and she is not alone. The number of Venezuelans who long for liberation from socialism's oppressive and destructive influence is growing. And so today, in support of them and my friends, I want to talk about Venezuela's descent. I have long suspected that many socialist sympathizers in the US, Canada, and Europe dismiss the atrocities and disturbing economic conditions in Venezuela simply because of its location in Latin America. But they shouldn't be so quick to suspect our countries would fare any better. Venezuela once had the fourth largest GDP in the world, and that's not ancient history. That was the 1950s, less than a century ago. In fact, many Europeans immigrated to Venezuela for economic opportunities they couldn't find at home. But clearly, something changed. Venezuela now ranks 145th out of 167 countries on the Legatum Prosperity Index. Freedom House gave Venezuela a 13 out of 100 in freedom, and forget Europeans flocking to Venezuela. Venezuelans are now fleeing the country in the millions. Between 2013 and 2019, the economy shrank to half its size. To understand how we got to this devastating low, we can't avoid the man who brought this new order to Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, and the environment in which he was created. 1983 was a turning point in Venezuelan history. That year, Hugo Chavez found purpose in all the wrong places. A charismatic military officer and professor at the Military Academy of Venezuela, Chavez was known for his impassioned speeches against the government. International oil prices had plummeted, and the Venezuelan bolivar had been devalued 100% in a single day, known as Viernes Negro. Venezuela being a petrostate meant its economy's reliance on the petroleum industry left it extremely sensitive to international market fluctuations. In the late 70s, during a particularly good season for petroleum, President Carlos Andrés Pérez nationalized the oil industry. So in 1983, the country had just experienced the most worrisome kind of high, the one that happens just before the devastating drop, the kind that leaves your stomach in your throat. As the bolivar plummeted in value, Chavez capitalized on the growing discontent by launching the left-wing revolutionary Bolivarian movement 200, a movement that current Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro would later join. Just 6 years later, another moment of chaos would be capitalized upon. After receiving an IMF loan in 1989, re-elected President Pérez reduced fuel and public transportation subsidies, raising the price of bus tickets by 30%. What could go wrong? When the price increase went into effect early on February 27th, just before payday, riots erupted. Government security forces responded very aggressively. The official government death toll was 276, while NGOs estimate over 1,000 people died. The event, known as the Caracazo or the Caracas Smash, set the stage for Hugo Chavez's ascent. He led a coup against Perez's government just 3 years later. That coup and a subsequent one later that year both failed, and Chavez ended up in prison, but his televised speeches endeared him to an increasingly disaffected public. In 1998, Chavez was elected president of Venezuela. At the turn of the century, things were looking good for old Hugo. He launched his Plan Bolivar 2000, which expanded vaccines, roads, and housing construction. And the public voted in favor of reconstructing the government, including expanding presidential terms to 6 years and reducing the legislature from 2 houses to 1. But soon after, in 2002, a coup ousted Chavez and his government, who then came and ousted them right back. But the tensions that created the coup remained. Chavez and the PDVSA, the nationalized oil company, butted heads over leadership, leading to a strike, a temporary suspension of oil exports, and the firing of 18,000 employees. Over the next decade, Chavez consolidated power, increased spending on public projects to win the favor of the people, and severed ties with the United States, choosing instead to build alliances with China, Russia, Iran, and Cuba. It's like the 21st century axis of evil. In 2011, Hugo Chavez traveled to Cuba to be treated for cancer. Interesting when a president doesn't even trust his own country's medical system. And this cancer would ultimately kill him in March 2013. In January of that year, Chavez was so ill he missed his own inauguration. And if you thought this was Venezuela's opportunity to finally break free, I have some bad news. 3 months before his death, Chavez announced his own hand-picked successor, Nicolas Maduro, who won the presidential election soon after Chavez's death by an extremely thin margin. And Maduro has held on to power ever since, by any means necessary. You may know Maduro for his recent stunts, including picking fights with billionaire Elon Musk, being one of the most notoriously corrupt and oppressive leaders in the world, or as the hero of Venezuelan cartoon Super Bigote, just to name a few. He first crossed paths with Chavez as part of his revolutionary Bolivarian Movement 200 while Chavez was still in prison. But even before then, Maduro might as well have been crafted in a lab to be the socialist dictator we see today. He was raised by a passionate leftist trade union leader and dropped out of high school to pursue the working class radical lifestyle as a bus driver and union organizer. His adventures as a young revolutionary brought him to Cuba. There he gained ideological instruction from friends of Fidel Castro. Back home, Maduro gained power through various elected and appointed positions in Chavez's government before being named as his successor. And while Chavez constructed the Venezuela that we see today, Maduro turned daily life in Venezuela into a living nightmare. Since 2014, over 7 million people have fled the country. It begs an obvious question: why are they leaving? It may have something to do with, I don't know, the power outages, food and medical shortages, and extrajudicial killings. See, something shifted when Maduro took office, like the sun hid behind a cloud, never to shine again. First, can you believe it? Oil prices crashed. It's almost like this happens every time, and government-run economies are bad for planning for these eventualities. But plummeting oil prices means a lot to a country that is nearly totally dependent on the revenue. So rampant inflation, as well as shortages of basic necessities, left millions of Venezuelans in extreme poverty, which made them a little revolty. Fair. But if there's one thing to understand about Maduro and other socialist leaders of his caliber, it's that personal power matters far more than his people's prosperity. So while they were getting revolty, he got super suppressy. A few years into his presidency, Nicolas Maduro launched the FAES, or the Special Action Forces of Venezuela. Between 2016 and 2019, they murdered 18,000 people in these alleged resistance to authority cases, often showing up in black ski masks, unmarked black trucks, raiding the homes for food, and traumatizing the families. In 2018, Maduro won re-election, but many dismissed this and the results of the 2024 election. Can a democracy truly exist when a leader jails his opponents, murders dissidents, and cultivates an atmosphere of paranoia and fear. In 2019, the opposition movement attempted to form an interim government with the National Assembly Speaker, Juan Guaido, as the interim president. And although this move was recognized by 50 countries internationally, Maduro remained in power due to the military's backing. That same movement is where Maria Corina Machado emerged as the ascendant face of the opposition. But even before then, Maria was stirring up trouble for the authoritarian regime, both under Chavez and Maduro. She led Sumite, a voters' rights group started in 2002, which led a failed recall against Chavez. In 2010, the same year Chavez expropriated part of her own family's steel company, Savensa, Machado was elected to the National Assembly and became one of the most outspoken voices against the socialists in power. But this led to her expulsion from the assembly in 2014 under Maduro, and an additional 15-year ban from holding public office. Despite the attempt to suppress her voice, she ran and won the primary for the opposition party in 2023. But as she amassed a groundswell of support both domestically and internationally, Maduro dealt her and Venezuelan democracy a terrible blow. Maria Corina Machado was banned from running for president due to financial irregularities from her time as a lawmaker. Sure, Jan. It was, by most accounts, an obvious attempt to squash the opposition, but Machado, relentless and emboldened in her response, threw her support behind Edmundo Gonzalez, who was tearing it up in the polls leading up to the election. And can you guess what happened next? Maduro won. Several major democracy and election-watching organizations have declared this election stolen and fraudulent, with some of them even producing evidence they themselves collected. And now, with the Nobel Peace Prize being awarded to Machado, it seems like the international community is really paying attention. And that means something, because during Chavez's ascent to power, there were many Western progressives who saw Venezuela as some shining example of their ideas gone right. Countless celebrities from the US gave him good international press, including Sean Penn, Michael Moore, and Naomi Campbell, for some reason, which in retrospect must be so shameful. I desperately need an update from all of them. The United States has tried adding pressure to the situation using sanctions, but these have not deterred the socialist leadership of Venezuela. To be quite honest, I don't know how Venezuela escapes this stronghold, but I believe Maria Corina Machado is part of that picture. And even more than that, I believe the millions of Venezuelans oppressed under this regime will be the ones who topple it. Having met so many dissidents who have fled the country, words can hardly express the courage, intelligence, and drive of these individuals who will spend their lives fighting to liberate their home. I think there are many lessons to be learned from what happened to Venezuela, but one stands out as the first step to avoid. As viewers of this channel know, there is a perennial temptation to nationalize the oil. Do not nationalize the oil. Whatever you do, it's a bad idea. I believe this is what started Venezuela's decline. The belief was that seizing all production and profits of the country's oil would generate more income than taxing private companies would. And for a brief moment, sure, socialism might feel good. International oil prices are high. You haven't lost half the workforce to strikes and firings. This is the socialism honeymoon period. When the country is beginning to introduce socialism, there is still wealth to extract from the economy because capitalism and private industry have created it. And so the people enjoy the spoils of the plunder. But socialism is a progressive disease. It takes over more and more over time. As less and less revenue is generated by private industry and the government spends money like a drunk buying shots for the whole bar, a country's coffers empty out, until all that's left are industries barely capable of generating revenue or meeting people's basic needs, and the country is left with a major socialism hangover. It could go as far as socialism poisoning. While capitalism creates wealth, socialism squanders it. It's why this honeymoon period never lasts. Hyper-socialist countries always fall into extreme poverty and dysfunction. This is when socialism becomes authoritarian. Its political faces are no longer popular enough to get democratically elected, and so they squash the very thing that put them in power. We saw this clearly in Venezuela. Maduro himself tried to coup his way into dictatorship in 1992, but found that democratic socialism was an easier way for him to ascend. And once he gained power, he began to consolidate it. The second lesson we can learn from Venezuela is to never fall for wannabe dictators who use the word democracy as a distraction from their authoritarian impulses. And the third lesson we can learn is to be like Maria Corina Machado, bold, unrelenting, and selfless. Please leave your thoughts in the comments and share this video with friends and family. Let me know if you'd like a follow-up video deep diving into more Venezuelan history. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, and I will see you all again next week for a new video. Ciao!